What is up, guys? My name is Ozzy Riv, and this is Bottled in Bond. Alright guys, so welcome back and welcome again to my channel, Bottled in Bond. I truly appreciate you guys showing up. I really truly appreciate all the views and the likes that I got on my first video introducing Bottled in Bond. And today we are actually getting the first flavor, or our first bottle. The first bottle we're going to be reviewing today is Knob Creek 100 proof. Okay, so Knob Creek itself, it's a good company. For those of you who didn't know, Knob Creek is actually bottled and distilled by none other than Jim Beam. Okay, so that's in Claremont, Kentucky. All right, so Knob Creek is a bourbon that is aged for what they like to call 9 years. They used to advertise the 9 years in their bottles. For some unknown reason, now they do not put the 9-year advertisement on their bottles. They do have a separate bottle which they do advertise the amount of years, but not in the small batch 100 proof bottle of Knob Creek. So before we begin talking and going into more details about this bottle, I want to talk about something in particular. All right, that is the bourbon. All right, I know I did mention to you in the first video that bourbon is, bottled and distilled in Kentucky. Now, there's a couple things I want to touch base on before we actually get deep and dirty into the actual bottle itself of Knob Creek. First thing I want to talk about is, like I said, the term bourbon. So there's many things that need to come into place for a whiskey to actually be called bourbon. Okay, but in reality, there's 6 main categories that need to come into play, and I've been reading up on a few things, and watching a couple of videos from a couple of people, to include the Bourbon Night, very good show. Go check them out whenever you have a chance. And one of the things that he mentioned is the 6 major things for this whiskey to be called a bourbon is: number 1, needs to be made in the USA. I'm pretty sure most of you guys who are watching this video already knew that. It needs to be US made. Okay, the second thing is the grains. The grain mixture has to be, or needs to be, at a 51%. That's number 2. It needs to be aged in new charred barrels. So let's talk about that term, charred barrels. These companies, right? These major companies are making these barrels for many different companies, whether it be for breweries, for wine companies, for gin companies, whatever companies need to house or age their liquor in a specific barrel. Now, these charred barrels that are going to these bourbon companies, they char them, and for it to be considered bourbon, it needs to go into this brand new barrel that's charred. So in other words, it cannot be a used barrel, it cannot be an uncharred barrel, it has to be a brand new charred barrel. Okay, so a little more on that. These barrels that are charred and made and are used for the first time to make these bourbons, to age these bourbons, after they get used, they cannot be reused, right? So what these companies do, right, is they resell them to many other companies, such as wine companies, gin companies, just many different companies that use their liquors to re-age their liquor in these bourbon aged barrels. So it gives it that smoky, that charred flavor, that whiskey bourbon flavor after effect. To include one of these wine companies that is off of Hubert, and I will actually be reviewing one of their bottles. Is very good tasting. It's actually a wine, and I'll just kind of stray away in that episode and talk about that wine and that winery a little bit, just to give you a tasting of how good this wine is and how I rate it based on my opinion. Okay, so moving along, these barrels can also last. They have an age expectancy anywhere between 60 to 70 years. So in other words, these companies, whether it be a brewery, a gin company, they are putting their liquor into these aged charred barrels, and they're keeping it there for however long, 4 years, 10 years, 12 years, 20 something years, and then they pass it along. So in other words, a gin company might take it along, and then a winery might take it along, then at the bottom of the pole, a brewery might take it along, just because it knows the flavor that it's going to get, the mixture that it's going to get from aging their beer in these barrels. So moving along, the fourth thing that needs to happen is that these bourbons need to be distilled at no more than 160 proof. That's the distillation process, when it actually goes through all the different stills and it gets distilled. The mash, pretty much, the vapor evaporates, and it's a whole scientific process that I've heard many and many of times, and I just can't go into the exact details from all the different distilleries that I visited. But Through the distillation process, it needs to be distilled at no more than 160 proof, which comes out at about 80% alcohol. Now, the fifth thing is that it needs to enter the barrel. The actual aged charred cask needs to enter the barrel at no more than 120 proof, which makes it 62.5% ABV, alcohol by volume, right? That's the alcohol percentage. And then the last thing, when it goes into the bottle, right, initially, it needs to be bottled at an 80 proof, which makes it a 40% alcohol for a 2-year. Now remember, the longer you age it, the more the proof, the more the percentage of alcohol by volume. And unfortunately, the less that you're gonna pour out of that aged cask, because it evaporates, what they would call the spirits, and you just lose more bourbon, but the flavor becomes so much more intense, flavorful. The aroma, all the different grain mixtures come into play, and it's delicious, right? All right, so the proof will go up. So what I mean by that, when it gets bottled, it will be at an 80% proof and 40% alcohol, but that's only for the 2-year. So it will be higher the more years that you get. So that's like the bare minimum for a 2-year. So in other words, it can't be any higher than that for a 2-year. And if it's lower than that, I mean, I consider it straight up trash, right? So moving along, let's talk about Knob Creek now. I'm gonna bring it right back up here and just go ahead and give you guys a quick view of this. So Knob Creek is distilled at the Jim Beam distillery, which I actually a few years back got a chance to visit, take a few pictures. Really nice. So Jim Beam makes a plethora of different bottles as well, different proofs, different ABVs, different flavors, which I'm not too particular about. I don't really enjoy tasting a bourbon, or let alone a whiskey that has flavor, not only because it dips down on the alcohol by volume, but it just doesn't give you that same flavor sensation, the aromas, the taste on the palate that a regular non-flavored whiskey and or bourbon would give you. So the mash bill that we spoke about was at a 51%. Okay, you have all this information here. It's 100 proof, 50% alcohol. You can read up on it. You go online, read up on it, watch a couple videos. Okay, so the mash bill is at a 51%, and we're gonna pick up different hints and different flavors whenever we sniff it, we taste it, and then kind of like the aftertaste once we get done tasting. So I went online and I started reviewing a couple things. There's a couple companies, not companies, but a couple websites such as Distiller. Distiller gave it 84 points, and I take it that is out of 100. So it's 84 out of 100. Usually what these companies do, or what these websites would do, is they'll just pretty much rate it based off cost. And speaking of cost, this bottle doesn't cost too much. This bottle is actually right around $30 or so. I think I got this one on sale, so it was a little bit less, maybe $26. So it was a pretty good find at one of the local stores here. So Distiller gave it an 84. Okay, and there was another website out there that was called the Bourbon Gentleman. It's two gentlemen that actually go out and they, like I said, same thing. The flavor, the sniff, the flavor on the palate, the aftertaste, the price, pretty much everything. And it's their own personal opinions, such as mine. And one of them rated it at a 7 out of 10, and the other one rated it at a 6 out of 10, a little bit lower for whatever reason. Like I said, you could go on Bourbon Gentleman and look it up on their website. And then there's one called Modern Thirst, and they give it an 86, a little bit higher, 2 points higher than Distiller. So, well, today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening up this bottle, and we're going to be getting a quick taste of it and see what it's like. So, let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I know you guys can see here that the Knob Creek bottle is sealed a little different than the typical Jim Beam bottles and the typical Maker's Mark bottle. I know that one's made by hand. I can't necessarily say that this one's made by hand. Maybe the dipping process is. When we were at the distillery, I didn't really get a chance to see how they make this. It looks like there's something engraved on it, which can maybe make me assume that there's some kind of machine or some kind of a device that comes in and presses it while the wax is actually still hot. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and try to open this. There's a knob here, makes it very easy for you to go ahead and open it. Kind of sticky, right? All right, comes off fairly easy. And then even though, so this is still the wax, so even though it does seem like it has a cork inside, it does have the top for you to easily just twist off and pull right off for the uncorking. Such a nice taste, nice smell. All right. So what I'm gonna be using today is just a regular snifter, one of the ones, typical ones they usually get from visiting the Jim Beam distillery. I don't know why I said Bim, but anyways, we're gonna go ahead and give it a good pour, see what the color looks like, and we'll go from there. All right, I know that's usually a lot more than your typical shot, but the reason why I want to do that, and before I continue, I want to go ahead and close this off. The reason why I want to do that is because I want to show you guys the actual color. Okay, so this is the typical 9-year. Okay, if it's a typical 9-year, it's just about right. Very caramel, dark color. It's not as light colored as your typical Jim Beam would be. Your 4-year, your 2-year, it's a little bit darker. It looks very smooth. It looks very charred. You could tell that it's been aged a little bit longer than your typical 4-year. So the typical sniff test that master distillers teach and coach everyone to do is just a regular sniff just through the nose. Very good. I get like a hint of vanilla, a little nutty. Obviously you're gonna get a good sniff of the oak, the charredness of it. Now the second type of sniff that they'd prefer you to do is with an open mouth. It almost opens up. You get a little hint flavor on your actual palate. Okay, a little sugar, maybe brown sugar. Still the same, a little peppery, but it's still the same charredness. The brown sugar, the little nutty, definitely some vanilla. Okay, and it's gonna be almost the same throughout the different bottles per se, not necessarily, but for the most part, you're gonna get that same feeling, that same aroma. You might get a little coffee in some, you might get a little more caramel in some. It just depends on how long it was aged. The mash bill will be the same, but how long it was aged, during what temperatures, during what seasons, what part of the state, all that, and maybe different ingredients that they might add. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and give it a quick taste. That's good. Okay, so usually when I drink bourbon, it's either too light or it's burning. It's very strong burning in the throat, the nose, and the palate, and the in your nostrils, even in your eyes. And this is fairly smooth. Now drinking it neat, you get more of the flavors. If you do a splash of water, you get a little bit more. It almost opens up. And remember, by a splash of water, I don't mean you're gonna open up a faucet for 2.5 nanoseconds or nothing like that. Literally just get a regular bottle of water, get the cap, put it in there, quick dash, or just quick, if you have any other kind of device, small spoon, just go ahead and throw it in there. Just a small splash of water just to open up the flavors, the aroma, so you can get a better feel of it. Some people just like it neat. Some people like it on the rocks. On the rocks does not mean a crap ton of ice. It just means one small cube, or you could get the rocks that you can put in the freezer and make cold, just so you don't get that diluting of the whiskey, and you kind of water it down, especially if you're using bigger ice cubes. But like I said, right now we're just trying it neat. Very, very smooth. It does have a strong back end. The aftertaste is a little strong on the throat, but nothing that's overwhelming. Okay. Really good though. I really, really like this one. The 100 proof, you can tell the 100 proof is in there. It's a little bit stronger than your typical 80s, 85s, and 92s that I've had. I don't think my reaction would have been that simple if it would have been a 120 proof. And to include the Wild Turkey 101, Wild Turkey 101 is really up there. But this one's pretty good. I would recommend it. Now, on a scoring, per my opinion, on a scoring scale, I don't really like going with the whole, 7 out of 10 or, I'll give it 4 stars or something like that. I prefer more the way the distiller and the Modern Thirst websites do it, where they do a whole ranking of 100. It lets you get in there to the nitty gritty and be more detailed about your grading. So I'll say this: for a bottle and the price at 100 proof, especially at 50% ABV, I would possibly give this bottle, like I said, I'm especially taking into consideration the price, I would definitely give it an 87. And the reason why I say that is because I do agree with the distiller's comments, and I do agree with the Modern Thirst comments and a couple other websites that I read. It is up there, but it does not rate the 90 plus. But it is a high 87. I would say maybe 87.5 if you want it to be that detailed. I do recommend this. Okay, if you got $30 laying around and you wanted a good whiskey, a good bourbon to have for the weekend, maybe sip with a ton of rocks, definitely recommend it. If you were planning on mixing this whiskey, this bourbon, with anything else such as Coke, I don't recommend it. Don't waste that. I get it is only $30, but unless you have a wide array of liquors sitting at your house and this is just one of your bottom shelf liquors that you have, then go ahead. If that's what you are into, then go ahead. I personally try to stay away from mixing products, not necessarily because of the whole, oh, well, you're ruining the bourbon or the whiskey. No, it's just your hangover is probably going to be shitty. All right. But Knob Creek, definitely try to drink it neat, or at least on the rocks, whether it be a couple of ice cubes or maybe one of the stones, the ice stones. Obviously, if we're talking, hey, this is a bourbon, how do you rate this bourbon with every other bourbon out there? Regardless of price and everything, I mean, it's gonna go down to the 70s, maybe 75, 74, but it's still high up there. Okay. One thing that I want to do on this show that I did not mention is I was also gonna go through a couple bottles, one per show, that I'm not gonna rate. Okay. So Jim Beam, great people. Like I said, the distillery, great place to go. Do I recommend Jim Beam? I don't know. That's your decision. Personally, I do not like it. I used to drink Jim Beam. It used to be a weekly thing for me. Jim Beam was my go-to before I started drinking Evan Williams. Nowadays, I could care less for Jim Beam. Now, this is what I mean. The typical Jim Beam, $14, $15 bottle. I don't like it. I don't like it anymore. I feel like my palate has been accustomed to so many other better better bourbons. And I feel like Jim is just not in my vocabulary anymore. Even though I can still drink, as a regular Evan Williams, just a regular 40 Evan Williams, which costs a couple dollars less than Jim Beam, I still would not touch Jim Beam. The flavor's just not there. So all in all, like I said, average rating will remain in the 80s based off price. You're looking at maybe an 85 to an 87, high 87.5, like I said, based off price and everything, and comparing it to its competitors in the mid shelf and all that. Great bourbon to drink. By all means, go ahead and buy it if you want something good for the weekend. Take your time with it. Don't just waste it all in one night. But if that's what you like and you want to have some fun, then by all means, go for it. If you like this video and you want to see more, go ahead and leave me a comment. Like this video. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And click the little bell so that you can get notifications whenever I post my next videos. This is Ozzy. This is Bottled and Bond. Thank you for watching. Cheers.